Hello, finance students. Well, this lesson is the lesson where we, in some sense, finally arrive at maybe what we've been building to, and that of all the different tasks and goals a financial planner might be working on with clients, retirement is probably the most common and the one we think of first. So, today is our lecture on the retirement planning process, and there are um, many steps to retirement planning, in the same style as we went thought about when we thought about total portfolio management for a client. So, step one is being familiar with retirement issues broadly. There are specific problems and concerns that come up when thinking about retirement that don't necessarily apply to things like college savings or making a large purchase. But as is typical when we think about financial planning, developing goals is really important. For example, it can be a very different planning process if we're considering a complete retirement at a younger than Social Security age versus a phased retirement where maybe there's a career change or a reduction in hours. So, developing the goal. Also, clients may have different lifestyle goals in retirement. So, for example, if I was, as a client, I had mentioned a strong desire to travel in retirement. That means a couple things. First, I have to retire early enough to get to travel. And while my health is still good, I need to maintain my health, which is a separate issue. And then also, I'm going to need the financial resources to be able to travel effectively. Those are all very different sort of requirements than someone who wants to transition towards a work from home part-time job and has a plan to downsize his lifestyle at the advent of that switch, right? So if you have an income still and a reduced lifestyle is different than no income and an increased lifestyle. It's going to put greater demands on retirement savings. With that in mind, then, it's important to be knowledgeable about retirement structures because there's lots of different ways, lots of different structures to get to retirement goals, and that's complicated by all the different legal avenues that have been carved out to get there. So there's a bunch of tax policies specific to retirement that affects, to a great degree, the kind of decisions people should be recommended for their retirement. Another step in the process is analyzing risks. There's lots of different risks that can be relevant. We'll go over a few of them. Examples could include how sensitive is the retirement plan to career uncertainty, how sensitive is the retirement plan to changes in health, that sort of thing. Considering the risks, considering the possible structures, marrying the goals to the structures, keeping risk in mind, leads to a decision on a retirement investment policy. So, given the broad menu of possible options, a few are selected, and that generates the plan. The plan generates expected returns, right? The nature of the plan will dictate how much earnings are expected, and then and that will directly affect the dollar needs, right? So if goals, right? So you marrying the financial goals have certain dollar expectations. The plan generates returns, and then those are connected with a dollar value goal, which creates then a savings goal. So So the couple phases to that, but connecting them all together, you get to that sort of magic number where you say, okay, this is the percentage of your annual, income that you need to be setting aside to be able to achieve what you're trying to do. And so then that creates a savings plan, it creates an investment plan, it creates a long-term retirement plan, and then that plan is periodically reviewed and updated as things change. So doing it properly is an involved process with lots of different steps. So we'll go over each of those in a little more detail. So first is familiar yourself with retirement issues. So so just broadly speaking, retirement has changed over time. Lots of people, especially as they approach retirement age, have a lot of worries and interest in whether they will be able to retire, will they be able to maintain the lifestyle they're accustomed to in retirement, and there are significant government expenditures for the retired, and retirement age has declined, even though Social Security retirement age has not. Actual retirement age has declined since the mid 20th century. So this is just a picture you can see, right? This is workforce participation in workforce participation by men and women, and both, right? Ages 55 plus. Right? So you can see that in 1975, a large rate, 50% of men were still participating in the labor force at age 55 and over, and that declined rapidly through the early 90s, but has since rebounded. So the percent of people working late life has increased since the mid 90s. It's also important to think about too that people have been living longer, and so you get, right, that's going to, as longevity increases, it's going to decrease that percentage. So the decline from the mid 70s to the mid 90s can be somewhat related to longevity, and so the increase despite longevity gains really speaks to that people are working longer or more people are participating in the labor force post 55, and you can especially see this with respect to women. So in the mid 70s, 1 in 5 women in this age group were working, and by 2010, it's closer to 1 in 3. So that's a big increase in women's participation in the workplace at retirement age, and a resurgence of men participating in the workplace at retirement age. The elderly, right, retirement age and older folks there's been major changes for a couple reasons, right? So there's been changes in healthcare over the last 70 years, changes in the way the workforce works, right? When labor was very physically demanding, you can imagine it'd be very hard to do let's imagine that I'm a beverage distributor, and I'm moving heavy cases. I've got, if it's barrels, I'm lifting and manipulating heavy barrels, right? This is hard, arduous labor, and it would be difficult to be able to do that effectively into your 70s, regardless of gender and physical condition. And of course, those careers still exist, but the percentage of us that are working in those kinds of careers has declined over time, and that has made it physically possible for more people to work later in life. And in many cases, people are choosing to do that. So and with longevity too, the result is that more and more of the percentage of people in the United States are retirement age and are retired and drawing for Social Security. And so that, even though the Social Security was, fairly financially solvent in, so around 2000, there were a lot of warning bells sort of being raised that as folks are living longer and spending more time in retirement, the Social Security contributions didn't necessarily match what that shift in longevity, and so we get the result of, for example, the retirement age being changed from 65 to 67, phased in over a period of time. The bigger issue is medical costs. Medical costs are far outpacing inflation, and as we get better at medical care, people live longer. People who need lots of medical care live longer, and so that drives up even more costs. So there's the financial stability of Medicare is less certain than Social Security, and so it remains to be seen what will be done about that. So there's lots of issues that your clients may be thinking about. Will I have access to Social Security when I retire? Will supplemental Medicare insurance be a necessity rather than a luxury by the time I retire? Those kind of things. So given like the sort of a broad landscape, then your clients will come to you with retirement goals, presumably, or you can help them have goals for retirement. Which can include questions like, what do you want retirement to look like? What do you want to have a more modest lifestyle in retirement, or do you want to have a more lavish lifestyle? Do you want to travel or not travel? Do you have a great desire to do bequests for your children and grandchildren? All of those things affect how much money will be required. The timing as well, right? Sooner leaves less time to save up for retirement and demands more financial resources from retirement. And so the timing matters a lot. An early retirement is basically a decision to select financial independence. So your clients might want to continue working despite the ability to retire, but they want to be able to retire at a younger age than they're planning on, and that's part of their plan. So that could be a goal as well. So there's lots of different ways to get to goals. We'll talk through a couple different structures. So the first are pensions. So pensions are, in general, it's a stream of income you're receiving from some kind of outside source. A good example would be if you work. Let's imagine that you you have a client who's a member of a trade union and has worked for many years in a manufacturing facility, and the union itself has a retirement plan connected with the union that has been accepting dollars from the union members and investing it on their behalf, and then will pay a pension upon those union members reaching retirement age or vesting. State employees often have state pensions. I actually have a pension, very small pension through the Wisconsin state system. I taught for 2 years part-time for University of Wisconsin-La Crosse, and so for that second year I was vested in the Wisconsin state retirement system, and so I have a very small amount of money set aside in that Wisconsin state retirement system. But on the positive side, that money went into the retirement system in my mid-20s. So it's going to have a long time to grow and get bigger. It still won't get very big, but it will have a lot of time to get bigger over that time frame. So the big thing with pensions is they are outside of the control of the person, of the recipient, for the most part, right? You have control over how much maybe you contribute sometimes. But an example of something that can go wrong is you might have a pension through an employer who goes bankrupt, and the funded pension liabilities weren't up to the level that they were needed to meet the redemption requirements later, and so your pension doesn't end up being as big as you were promised when you invested in it because the original corporation ran into financial trouble. So there's lots of regulations around pensions to try to help this prevent this from happening. There's some insurance provisions to try to protect pensions from these kind of situations. This all sort of comes out of a bit of shared trauma from the 80s when corporations were doing leveraged buyouts and reneging on pension promises in order to save money. So you might have a corporation that had a humane and reasonable treatment of their employees, including a generous pension promise, but these generous pension promises led to lower value in the stock market, which led to cheaper acquisition prices for companies that could then, undo all those promises and reap a financial reward. So, because basically, if your pensions are reliant on this outside third party, and the third party is subject to mergers and acquisitions activity out of your control and the company's control, it makes sense to have a regular framework to try to prevent too much chaos from happening. But at the end of the day, pensions are probably less and less popular outside of state employment, and in general, we've moved more towards an individual model where even through employers, individuals are setting aside retirement savings in accounts in their control rather than outside. But it still exists. So there's public pensions and private pensions that still are relevant. I mentioned vesting already. So often you need to work so long before you are vested in the system. Though there's limits. So the federal government sets limits through ERISA on how long you can wait to vest, and how pensions have to be fair across the organization, that kind of thing. So there's specific regulation for pensions that handle some of these issues. So there are qualified plans and non-qualified plans. We got to get into the difference between those. So a qualified plan is a pension structure that comply with government regulations. And if you comply with government regulations, you're allowed to place pre-tax dollars into the plan. In effect, you get a tax deduction for contributions to the pension. Since you're avoiding tax, you have more money available, which leads to higher savings and ultimately higher income in retirement. That said, because untaxed dollars are contributed, earnings are all going, and in fact, not just earnings, principal withdrawn from the pension are treated as ordinary income, right? So even though you're getting capital gains and dividend gains on these investments, they are treated as ordinary income because it was ordinary income tax that you avoided at the start. So that's a tax disadvantage of a qualified plan. But still, having the ability to get the tax deduction is a big deal, because often when you're thinking about withdrawing from a qualified plan, it's in retirement when your marginal tax rate can be quite low, right? The federal tax is a graduated tax, right? The more money you have, the more tax you pay per dollar. And so since you tend to be drawing a low income in retirement, you pay low taxes per dollar of income. And so it's a way, in effect, to shift money from high tax years to low tax years. There's two principal types of qualified plans. The first is defined contribution plans. And this is where you put money into a defined contribution into the plan. So I set aside $550 every month into the defined plan, and so my benefit is going to change up and down depending on how the markets behave and in my retirement is the defined contribution plans are often portable when you change jobs or retire, because in a way you've contributed money kind of to an account and you have a balance at that account. That's kind of how they're usually administered. Defined benefit plans work differently, so it's a stated stream of income, often a level amount throughout retirement. So you have some stated promised benefit, here's how much you'll get, and then perhaps the more you contribute, the more you get, but not always. Sometimes it's once you just vest or get to your years of service, then you get a defined benefit, or you get a benefit equal to the percentage of your salary, or the last 5 years, or the best 3 of 5 years. There's lots of different ways these can work. A really common example of a defined benefit plan that comes up a lot is for active duty military service people. If they, so after 20 years, they are entitled to a like a retirement benefit. And so if you retire from the service and continue on to do other work, you can still collect your military retirement. Obviously it's still income, and there's all this, there's still all these tax issues, but anyway, if you have clients who have been active duty military in the past, this is often something people have in mind when they choose to enlist in the service at a young age. Right? If you sign up at 18 to be in the Navy, at 38 you can retire and get a pretty nice financial benefit for the rest of your life. Right? So that's quite a lot of years. So it's a pretty it's a good financial benefit for service people that start at a young age. In a way, also, Social Security can be considered a defined benefit plan. It kind of functions like it. You do contribute, but your benefit only tangentially relates to your contributions. Right? Of course, the more money you make, the more you contribute, and your benefit is based on your highest earning period, so there's a little bit of wiggle room there, but mostly, right, your Social Security benefit is a stated dollar amount that you'll get, a fixed income that you'll get in retirement. A non-qualified plan doesn't meet these, and so it doesn't get special tax treatment, which means money saved in non-qualified plans are not tax deductible. You pay income tax and then you save it, and then you're not taxed on principal withdrawals, but you are taxed on appreciation in asset values. And so they're right, but taxable withdrawals are subject to ordinary income tax rates. So but basically, the big picture, the qualified plans allow you to deduct the income in the year you put it in, and the non-qualified plans don't. But that means at the end you have less tax liability than you would from a qualified plan. But usually the loss of the deduction is not going to make up for it. Although with recent tax law changes and the standard deduction being so high, it's different. But contributions to retirement don't it doesn't, the standard deduction doesn't affect those. So there's a lot of there's a lot of moving parts there, but in general the qualified plans are going to be often the superior option. So this is a specific one that isn't too common, but tax deferred compensation. So sometimes employers will defer the compensation, or so it's a very specific type of thing, and so it's not generally available. But if an employer is offering tax deferred compensation, or an employee gets it naturally in the course of their working life, then there's specific rules about it. So the sums of tax deferred compensation grow tax deferred, right? I mean, it's in the title, but the notion is that you're not paying along the way. You pay at the end, or once the withdrawal starts happening. Tax deferred compensation is an exception to the non-qualified pensions after tax rule. So normally non-qualified are not tax deferred. You pay the tax up front. So this is an exception. But then, right, you're relying on the company to pay you, and if the company pays you, then you're in line with everybody else to try to get money in bankruptcy. So that's a pretty big disadvantage to that. Another option are tax-deferred annuities. Tax-deferred annuities are savings vehicles that pay a steady stream of income, right? You get a steady stream of income once the annuity starts paying, usually at a particular age. Withdrawals are taxed only to the extent of income and gains on the original deposits. If not withdrawn by death, all gains over original cost are subject to tax at ordinary income tax rates. So this is a thinking about around an estate issue, right? So if a retiree dies before they get their full benefit, then there's going to be income that will occur right away, and that income will have ordinary income tax rates. So, and I guess I'm overstating my case with annuities, because you can have a variable annuity as well. So I mean, typically when you're talking about annuities, you're talking about a fixed annuity where you get just an established payment, probably monthly. But a variable annuity gives you a range of investment choices, which can include equity, and therefore can go up and down a lot. And so, right, if you're invested in a variable annuity and the markets do well, then your payments will be larger than if it does not, right? So, in general, annuities tend to have low returns because they're very low risk investments. You have in effect you have a guaranteed payment. You don't have for a fixed annuity. You have a guaranteed payment. You don't have a guaranteed number of payments, right? That depends on how long you live, but there's you don't have market uncertainty with them, and so that means that the returns are going to be lower since you're not risking as much. Usually there's a redemption charge if you haven't waited long enough, or right. So you don't want to be buying these things and then unbuying them. Like, you're kind of stuck with them once you commit to do it. Doing so slowly unwinding it often may not have the same charge. You can also do something called annuitizing, right? So that converts a lump sum asset accumulated into the payment of a fixed flow of income per year based on life's expectancy. So this is right. So it's if I take a big check, I write a big check, and then I say I annuitized that asset, and that converts it into a fixed flow of income based on my life expectancy, right? So you can say, oh well, if I am a young person, if I annuitize a large sum of money, I might not get very large payments because there's a lot of life left. Whereas if you're annuitize something later in life, you might have significantly more payments since there's not a lot of life expectancy left. So this is just, we're looking at a couple different things we could be doing other than an annuity, right? So if I get an annuity, I have these financial streams that behave a certain way, but I have these other products that kind of do this too, right? So for example, let's say I get a CD, right? So if I get a CD, that I put money, I commit to invest it, I get a stated interest rate, and then I get the money back. So what's my advantage of doing a tax-deferred annuity instead of doing a CD? Well, the big advantage is the tax deferral part, right? A CD you pay with after-tax dollars, and so there's no tax deferral there. But in a CD, you might even have a marketable CD, so you have a government agency guarantee. You can sell the CD or redeem it early for a small fee, maybe. And so, but in both cases, like if it's a fixed tax deferred annuity, the payments look very similar, right? In both cases, you have a steady stream of income. So a taxable bond is a same, right? So you get these payments from the taxable bond. You bought it with after tax money. So you're not getting the tax deferral. Also, if it's a long-term bond, the value of the bond is going to fluctuate as interest rates change. That's not something that, right, though, that, that dramatic shift in market value might still occur in annuity, but you'll never see it because it's not, there's no trade there, right? So the advantage, right, a taxable bond is marketable like immediately, not easily, but you can sell them, and so you might end up, right, you can end up getting a stream of income from your taxable bond, but the taxes are timed differently, and so depending on the marginal tax rate now of your client versus the marginal tax rate later when the income is coming, it can be smarter to do one or the other. Municipal bonds you don't have tax, you don't have federal tax at all, and so you're not deferring it. You're basically avoiding it, which is superior, but the returns are lower than an annuity, right? So municipal bonds know that they have this advantage tax treatment, and so they pay lower returns, and so it really kind of depends ultimately on the length of time that you plan on holding the municipal bond, right? Because if you're holding it for a long time, you are your tax is deferred for a long time, and the longer you defer it, the more value you get out of deferring it, and so you could defer it long enough to exceed the value of avoiding it altogether once you pay the return penalty you have to pay to get a municipal bond. Okay, so that'll be our first installment in different ways to achieve our goals in retirement. So I'll pick up next in the next segment.